The Boston winter morning was so cold that the window panes were frosted over. Carol Bradshaw was working on an urgent request from a client in her home office. She had established herself as a reputable graphic designer in the city. Having won numerous awards in the design industry, her delicate yet bold style was in high demand from many companies. "Honey, I brought you some coffee," her husband Mark said as he entered the room. He was a successful architect, known for his gentle smile and calm demeanor. They had met in college and married soon after graduation. Their 15-year marriage had become unshakable, built on a foundation of mutual respect for each other's work. "Thank you," Carol smiled as she took the mug. "I feel bad working on such a rushed job on Christmas Eve." Mark placed his hand on her shoulder. "Don't worry about it. I have to fly to Chicago tomorrow morning myself. There's an emergency meeting for the Greenfield project." "That's right," Carol sighed. "So we'll be spending Christmas apart this year." "Unfortunately, that's how it looks. But I'll be back by the 28th, Mark kissed her on the cheek. "Are you going to visit your mother?" Carol looked away from her screen and gazed out the window. Snow had begun to fall silently. "Yes, I plan to. It's been 6 months since I've seen Mom and my sister." Though she didn't say it aloud, her lack of enthusiasm about visiting home was evident. Elizabeth Fairchild lived in an upscale neighborhood in suburban Boston. Since losing her husband 8 years ago, her world had revolved around her daughter Linda. Carol and Linda's sisterly relationship was complicated. There was an age gap between them, and Carol was already a teenager when Linda was born. For Carol, Linda's birth marked the moment when her mother's affection completely shifted. Until then, Carol had been pampered as the only child, but the situation changed dramatically with Linda's arrival. Elizabeth doted on Linda, whom she called her miracle child, born in her later years, and Carol gradually felt excluded from the family circle. "I called Mom and told her I'd come for dinner tomorrow," Carol said as she finished her work. "Apparently Linda is coming home too. Doesn't she still live with your mother?" Mark asked. "Yes, but she seems to be working in fashion in San Francisco now. Mom always boasts, Linda has such talent." Carol's tone carried a hint of bitterness. Mark looked at his wife's expression and gently embraced her shoulders. "You're adults now, why not let bygones be bygones?" "I know," Carol forced a smile. "It's just that nothing I ever did caught Mom's eye. Even when I won industry awards, Mom just said, 'Oh, that's nice,' and immediately went back to talking about Linda's school." That evening, Carol said goodbye to Mark and headed to her family home. As she drove up the long driveway lined with luxury cars at the Fairchild residence, the mansion decorated for Christmas came into view. When she opened the front door, her mother's voice echoed through the house. "Linda, that dress is absolutely gorgeous. It suits you perfectly." In the living room stood Linda, beautiful as if she had stepped out of a photograph. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, and a pink cashmere dress draped her slender frame. "Carol." Elizabeth noticed her daughter and gave her a perfunctory hug. "We were just admiring Linda's new dress. It came straight from Paris." "Hello, Mom," Carol smiled. "Linda, it's been a while." Linda approached her sister hesitantly and kissed her on the cheek. "Thank you for coming." "Where's Mark?" "Work. He has to fly to Chicago tomorrow morning." "Oh, what a shame," Elizabeth's voice carried almost no trace of disappointment. "Well, dinner is ready. Linda, I've made roast duck, your favorite." During dinner, the conversation centered mainly on Linda's life and work. Elizabeth listened attentively to her daughter's stories, asked questions, and celebrated her successes. There were hardly any questions about Carol's work or life. This was a pattern she had grown accustomed to. Before bedtime, Carol stood by the window in her childhood bedroom, gazing outside. Snow was accumulating in the garden, and the Christmas tree lights twinkled in the darkness. Tomorrow was supposed to be the happiest day of the year, but she felt a vague uneasiness deep in her chest. As she lay in bed, Carol wished for healing in the family relationships. Now that they were adults, perhaps they could let go of past resentments and build a new relationship. With that thought in mind, she quietly closed her eyes. Christmas morning, Carol woke up earlier than usual. Outside the window, snow continued to fall silently. As a child, she used to rush out of this room, run down the stairs, and excitedly open the presents arranged under the Christmas tree. Everything was different back then. Her father was still alive, and the family was still a family. Taking a deep breath while brushing her hair in front of the mirror, Carol hoped to spend a peaceful day. Checking her smartphone, she found a message from Mark. "Merry Christmas, I love you. Give my regards to your mother and Linda." She smiled as she sent a reply. Mark's presence brought her peace of mind even from a distance. As she went downstairs, she could hear Linda's high-pitched laughter coming from the living room. "Sis, you're finally up. Merry Christmas." Linda was already perfectly made up, dressed in a bright red cashmere sweater and skinny jeans. Next to her sat Elizabeth, holding a coffee cup. "Merry Christmas," Carol smiled at them both. "It's a lovely morning. Now, it's time to exchange gifts." Elizabeth rose from the sofa. "Let's open them before breakfast." The three gathered around the Christmas tree. Various sized wrapped boxes were arranged beneath it. "I'll go first," Linda said excitedly, handing an elegantly wrapped small box to Elizabeth. "Mom, open it." As Elizabeth carefully removed the wrapping paper, a luxury brand scarf appeared. "Oh, Linda. This is beautiful." "Thank you, darling." She stood up and embraced her daughter. Next, Elizabeth handed a box to Linda. Linda tore through the wrapping paper much more eagerly than Carol would have and opened the lid. "Mom," she gasped. "This is..." Inside the box was an elegant necklace made of platinum and diamonds. A small but valuable blue sapphire glittered at its center. "Do you like it?" Elizabeth asked happily. "I chose it to match your eye color." "It's amazing. Absolutely amazing." Linda jumped up and hugged her mother. "Let me put it on right away." Elizabeth lovingly stroked her daughter's hair as she placed the necklace around her neck. "It suits you perfectly." Carol watched the two quietly. In a corner of her mind, old memories resurfaced. On her 16th birthday, she had asked for a necklace, but received a practical suitcase from her mother instead. "You'll need it when you go to college," was the reason given. "Carol, this is your gift to Mom." Linda picked up a box from under the tree. Carol had carefully chosen her gift for her mother. When opened, it revealed a custom photo album she had designed herself. Photos of Elizabeth from her youth to the present were arranged in an artistic layout. "Oh, that's nice," Elizabeth said flatly after briefly looking through the album. "Your talent shows in this." She kissed Carol on the cheek. "Thank you." Carol handed a small box to Linda. "Merry Christmas, Linda." When Linda opened it, there was a pair of designer sunglasses inside. "Wow, these are lovely." "Thank you, sis." Her voice was filled with happiness, but Carol could sense that her excitement had somewhat diminished after her mother's necklace. Now, Carol's present, Elizabeth picked up a small package from under the tree. "This is from Linda and me." Carol took the package and carefully opened it. Inside was a small bottle of perfume. The crystal-clear bottle contained a pale pink liquid. The label looked handwritten and read, "Essence of Truth." "This isn't a brand-name product," Elizabeth said. "It was specially made by a small perfumer in Paris." Linda found it. "Is that so?" Carol picked up the perfume bottle. "Thank you." "Smell it," Linda urged. "It's a scent that's perfect for you." Elizabeth smiled. There was something in that smile that Carol couldn't read. "Yes, it's a scent that's perfect for you." Puzzled but curious, Carol removed the cap from the perfume bottle. She brought the small bottle to her nose, and at first, it had a sweet floral scent. However, the fragrance quickly began to change. Something sour, bitter, and unpleasant started to mix in. That's strange. Before she could finish her sentence, the ceiling suddenly began to spin. The walls seemed to undulate, and the floor felt tilted. Carol's vision began to distort, colors blended together, and shapes appeared to melt. What is this? Carol couldn't stand anymore and collapsed to her knees. In her ears, she could hear someone laughing from far away. Linda and Elizabeth's faces appeared double or triple in front of her, their outlines seeming to dissolve. The satisfied expression on Linda's face burned into Carol's retina, along with her mother's cold smile. What's wrong, Carol? Linda's voice came from far away. Are you feeling ill? There was a theatrical tone of concern in those words. Help me. Carol couldn't speak anymore. Her brain wasn't functioning normally, and her thoughts seemed to vanish into a fog. Lying on the floor, she sensed her mother and sister staring down at her. She tried to reach out, but her arms wouldn't obey her will. The last thing she saw was Linda whispering something in her mother's ear, and the two of them leaning over Carol. Then everything was engulfed in darkness. As consciousness slipped away, Carol thought of Mark. How fortunate it was that she had sent him a reply on Christmas morning. And then she felt nothing. She sank into complete darkness and silence. In a corner of her mind, the horrifying understanding grew that this was not merely fainting or illness. Something was terribly, frighteningly wrong. And it wasn't accidental. It was planned. In the stillness of Christmas morning, Carol's consciousness faded completely away. When she opened her eyes, Carol first saw a stain on the ceiling. A brown watermark spread across the cracked white paint. This wasn't her bedroom. Nor was it a guest room at her family home. Where am I? When she tried to speak, she noticed her throat was dry. Even swallowing was painful. As she slowly tried to sit up, dizziness overtook her. She dropped her head back onto the pillow, closed her eyes, and took deep breaths. A few minutes later, she tried again. This time, she managed to sit up carefully and slowly. Looking around, she found herself lying in an antique wooden bed. The room was small, with sparse furniture. A worn dresser, a small nightstand, and an old wooden chair placed under the window. Lace curtains hung on the window, but it was dark beyond them. Carol put her feet on the floor and tried to stand. Her legs wobbled, and she held onto the nightstand for support. There was a glass of water on the table. She eyed it suspiciously, but her thirst went out. She cautiously took just one sip, checking that it didn't have any strange taste, then drank the rest. She walked to the window and pulled back the curtains. It was night outside. Beyond the window, a wide farmland stretched out, illuminated by moonlight. It seemed to be a rural farmhouse. However, when she tried to open the window, it wouldn't budge. Looking closer, she could see the window frame had been nailed shut from the outside. What on earth? Fear began to spread within her. She rushed to the door, but as expected, it was locked. She began to search the room thoroughly. The dresser drawers were empty. The closet had a few old clothes hanging in it, but they didn't look like they would fit. Her handbag, wallet, and cell phone were nowhere to be found. Hello? Can anyone hear me? She knocked on the door. Why are you keeping me locked in here? There was no answer. Looking around the room once more, she noticed a small bathroom beneath the bed. The old tiled bathroom had a toilet, sink, and small shower. Looking in the mirror, she saw her face was pale, with dark shadows under her eyes. What's happening? She whispered to the mirror. Fragmented memories of Christmas morning came back to her. The perfume, her mother's cryptic smile, Linda's satisfied expression, and the terrible sensation before collapsing on the floor. When she turned the faucet on the sink, water came out. At least the water worked. She washed her face and regained some composure. Returning to the main room, she looked for a clock but couldn't find one. Even her sense of time had been taken away. How long had she been unconscious? Hours? A day? Or several days? Looking out the window, she could see the starry sky. She realized she was in a place without city lights. There were no lights visible in the distance, it seemed to be an isolated location. She sat back on the bed, trying to organize her thoughts. It was clear that her mother and Linda had kidnapped her. But why? She had done nothing to them. True, their relationship wasn't warm, but she had never done anything to harm them. Suddenly, there was a noise outside the door. The sound of someone approaching. Carol tensed up. The sound of a key turning, and the door opened slightly. She stood up, taking a defensive posture. But the door didn't open fully. Instead, a small tray slid in on the floor. On it were a sandwich and a paper cup of water. The door was immediately closed and locked again. "Wait!" Carol cried, rushing to the door. "Why are you keeping me here? What do you want?" Only silence returned. She approached the tray and cautiously examined the food. It looked like an ordinary cheese sandwich. She was hungry but hesitated to eat it. However, she reasoned that if they wanted to harm her, they would have done so with the perfume. This sandwich was likely just to keep her alive. She began to eat slowly. As she ate, she looked out the window. The moon shone in the night sky. Would Mark have realized she was missing by now? Perhaps her mother and Linda had told him some lie. "Mark." She softly called his name. The next day, morning sunlight streamed through the window. She had barely slept all night. Again, there was the sound of footsteps outside the door, and another meal was delivered. This time it looked like breakfast, cereal with milk, and an apple. "Why are you keeping me locked up here?" she cried out again, but this time too, there was no answer. As the day progressed, she paced around the room numerous times. She thought about ways to escape, but the windows were nailed shut, and the door was solid. The small ventilation duct in the bathroom wasn't large enough for her to crawl through. On the third day, Carol noticed that one of the legs of the bed was slightly loose. Carefully pulling it, she managed to detach a metal rod. At least now she had a weapon. That night, she waited near the door when it was time for the meal to be delivered. But this time was different. No tray came, instead, she heard a voice through the wall. "Sis, how are you doing?" It was Linda's voice. Sweet and somehow mocking in tone. "Linda. What are you doing? Why are you keeping me locked up here?" Carol shouted toward the wall. "Don't be so dramatic. We're only keeping you here for a short time. Just long enough." "Long enough for what? What do you mean?" "Long enough for Mark to forget about you." Linda's voice contained a smile. "If only you weren't around, Mark could be mine." Carol froze. "Mark? All this, for Mark?" "He was mine," Linda's voice lowered. "Since high school. Before you found him in college, we had a special connection." "What are you talking about?" "Mark isn't. He doesn't know yet. But after you've disappeared due to mental problems, I'm going to comfort him. And he'll finally find true love." Carol leaned against the wall, supporting her trembling legs. Pure madness could be felt in her sister's voice. And most terrifying was that her mother was complicit in this plan. "Mom too. Mama has always been on my side. She only wants me to be happy." Carol gasped. "Linda, please, reconsider. This is criminal. You'll be caught." Linda gave a small laugh. "No one will suspect me. You've been depressed for a while. Mentally unstable. Your disappearance won't be surprising. Carol collapsed to the floor, trembling. Linda's words pierced her heart. For a long time, she had felt alienated from her family, but she never thought they hated her enough to do this. Linda. But there was no reply. Linda had gone. Carol sat slumped on the floor, tears streaming down her cheeks. But soon, the tears turned to anger. She stood up, gripping the bed leg tightly in her hand. She had no intention of dying as a victim. On the morning of the 5th day, Carol was trying to remove the door hinges using the metal rod she had taken from the bed leg. However, the metal piece from the old furniture was powerless against the solid door hinges. After numerous attempts, the metal rod had bent, and blisters had formed on her hands. Damn it! Carol slumped to the floor, wiping sweat from her brow. The last meal had been delivered the previous night. Hunger and fatigue were sapping her strength. But she couldn't give up. Mark must be desperately searching for her by now. Was there any way to get a message to him? Suddenly, the sound of a key turning. Carol quickly stood up, hiding the bent metal rod behind her back. The door opened, and Linda entered the room. She was holding a food tray. "Good morning, sis," Linda greeted her brightly, as if it were a normal family morning. "I brought you breakfast." Carol stared at Linda. Her sister was perfectly made up, wearing an expensive cashmere sweater. Around her neck gleamed the sapphire necklace their mother had given her for Christmas. She was completely calm, showing not a trace of guilt for keeping her sister captive. "Linda," Carol said in a calm voice. "Let me go. Right now." Linda placed the tray on the edge of the bed and smiled. "Not yet. Just a little longer. Mark must be looking for me. He'll figure out what you've done." Linda laughed lightly. "Oh, he's already been informed. That you suddenly disappeared due to mental issues. No one will believe that." "They already do," Linda said. "We explained about your past problems. Apparently, you've been suffering from depression and anxiety for years. Even Mark admitted that you sometimes behaved oddly." Carol was stunned. "That's a lie. Mark would never say such things. He's worried about you now. But at the same time." Linda smiled meaningfully. "He needs comfort." "You?" Carol said in a trembling voice. "You're not sane." "Hypocrite," Linda's voice mixed with coldness. "You're the one who stole Mark." "What are you talking about? 15 years ago, when he entered college, he was mine. You were still a child. Just 8 years old." "Even so." Linda's face contorted. "We had a special connection. He always praised my drawings. He patted my hair. He said he loved my smile." Carol shuddered at her sister's twisted thinking. For 15 years, Linda had distorted childhood memories and nurtured an insane obsession with Mark. "Linda, please, this is wrong. What you remember is just brotherly kindness. Mark never saw you as a romantic interest." "Lies." Linda screamed. "You seduced him. You stole him from me." Carol approached slowly. "Linda, you need help. Let's end this. It's not too late." "It's too late," Linda regained her composure. "The plan is already in motion." "What plan?" "The evidence regarding your mental state is already in place. Fake diagnoses, prescriptions, therapists' notes, everything is perfect. When you're found, you'll be put in a mental institution. And I will comfort Mark." Carol gasped in horror. "Is Mom involved in this too?" "Mama has always been on my side," Linda said proudly. "She chose me from the beginning. Not you." At that moment, something broke inside Carol. The anger she had been suppressing spilled out. "Why? I was always a good daughter. I got good grades. I didn't cause problems. So why did Mom only love you? Linda looked a bit surprised. Well, she hesitated a little. Maybe, because you look too much like Dad. Dad? Mama told me. Dad betrayed Mama. When you were 5, he was having an affair with another woman. Mama couldn't forgive that. And you have his eyes. Carol trembled. It felt as if the puzzle of her entire life had been solved. Her mother's coldness, indifference, all of it was revenge for her father's betrayal. Still, this is wrong, Carol said in a shaking voice. I'm your sister. Family. Soon, you'll be part of our past, Linda said quietly. She began walking toward the door. Carol moved instinctively. She grabbed the metal rod she had hidden behind her back and stood in Linda's way. No. Let me out of here. Right now. Linda showed fear for a moment but quickly regained her confidence. You don't have the courage to hurt me. Want to test that? Carol gripped the metal rod tightly. I have nothing to lose. A tense moment passed. The two sisters faced each other, complex emotions that had built up over decades filling the air. Just then, the sound of an engine could be heard in the distance. The sound of a car approaching. Linda's expression changed. Mama's back. She's brought what's needed for your eye treatment. What do you mean? Just putting you to sleep quietly, Linda said coldly. A few days later, you'll be found in a confused state on the other side of town. And then the necessary treatment will begin. Carol froze in terror. She darted to the window and looked outside. Indeed, a car was approaching. But, it wasn't her mother's car. It was Mark's SUV. Mark. Carol gasped. Linda also rushed to the window and looked outside. No way, why? The color drained from her face. There was a hole in your plan, Carol said quietly. On Christmas morning, I sent Mark a message. His Chicago trip was cancelled. Linda hurried toward the door, but Carol grabbed her arm. It's over, Linda. Outside the window, Mark jumped out of the car and ran toward the house. Determination and anger were written on his face. Mark had found Carol. Linda tried one last resistance. But Carol had nothing to lose anymore. She pushed Linda aside and began pounding on the door with all her might. Mark. I'm here. Help. When Mark kicked in the door, Carol ran toward him. Tears welled up in her eyes with the relief that the long nightmare was finally ending. Carrie. Mark embraced his wife. Are you all right? Are you hurt? I'm okay, Carol answered in a trembling voice. But Linda. When she turned around, Linda had already fled the room. Mark quickly took out his cell phone and called the police. Don't worry. The police will be here soon, he quietly embraced Carol. I'm glad I bought that smartwatch. The last location data pointed to here. But how did you know? Didn't Linda say I disappeared on my own? I thought it was strange, Mark's expression darkened. After receiving your message on Christmas morning, I got a call from Linda. She said you had suddenly disappeared. But your message was normal. And... He hesitated for a moment. There was something off about Linda's attitude. She was too calm. And your mother was the same. Neither of them seemed worried. The sound of sirens approached. The police arrived, and based on Carol's testimony, Linda was arrested along with her mother, Elizabeth. At the trial a few weeks later, all the truth came to light. On Linda's computer, not only the plan for Carol's confinement was discovered, but also drafts of fake love letters intended for Mark and fake social media posts created to make Carol appear mentally unstable. Surprisingly, Elizabeth's attitude on the witness stand was coldness itself. I didn't know about Linda's actions, she firmly insisted. That perfume was just a Christmas present. However, the prosecution submitted as evidence footage from a security camera installed in the living room of the family home. It showed Elizabeth handing the perfume bottle to Linda and speaking with a meaningful expression. Elizabeth was also to be investigated as a suspected accomplice. A year later, Carol and Mark had started a new life in a new city. A small house along the San Diego coast had become their place for a fresh start. "How are you today?" Mark gently asked about Carol's condition at the breakfast table. "Good," she smiled. "The counseling is really helping." Overcoming trauma wasn't easy, but Carol was recovering little by little. And her life had a new joy added to it. She gently placed her hand on her swollen belly. "Jennifer will be meeting us soon," she smiled. Mark took her hand. "She'll grow up in a real family. In a relationship where we protect and respect each other." Outside the window, the California sun was shining. Carol took a deep breath. After a long time of darkness, she had finally found the light. "Family bonds are something you choose," she said quietly. "Not something given to you." Mark kissed her. "That's right. And we've chosen a family based on love." A new future stretched out before them. The wounds of the past might never completely heal, but Carol would never look back again. She was determined to look only forward, walking with a family that truly embodied the meaning of the word.